Ireland, Norway, and Spain recognizing the Palestinian state. Is that a good move? Is it one you welcome? And do you think the US government should follow suit?
We'll just look at the second part first. There's virtually no chance that the U.S. is going to follow suit. I mean, we've done everything in the world at the United Nations and vetoing different measures, bringing forth others that move in that opposite direction. So I don't see any possibility, at least in the near term, that the United States would do that. But you also have to understand that each of those nations has different perspectives, and they approach this from a different perspective than the United States is. And you certainly see overall in the world, this is definitely the trend. I believe that brings up to 143 nations out of all the UN nations that are actually saying they support the statehood of Palestine. And it's ironic because the United States, our avowed policy is a two-state solution. And it's hard to see how you get to a two-state solution if you don't acknowledge that there are two parties in this. But there's political issues at play in the United States, and so I don't see any possibility of that going in. But especially for Ireland, I don't think that anybody would be surprised by that, given their history. And I believe it was either the prime minister or one of their spokesmen, I can't recall, brought those issues up when they announced their announcement. And so that makes sense from their perspective. And Norway and Spain are also looking at this from their own national perspectives, and they're just looking at it from a humanitarian issue. They're not as tied, to Israeli security as the United States has made themselves over decades. So it's a lot easier for them politically to do it than it is the United States. But again, I just think that this shows this is where the overall trend is going.
I see what you're saying about different nations having different priorities, and the US being unlikely to do it, but Ireland and so on having different histories. What seems to me to be odd is that you would recognize the Palestinian state after the 7th of October when you didn't before. It looks like an act of terrorism is being rewarded, and you are upgrading your relations after a terrible act has happened. And that seems illogical.
Well, yeah. Only if you look at it from that point of view, because I view it from a much wider lens. I think that it should have been done a long time ago. And this is not for Hamas. This is not rewarding Hamas. This is taking care of the Palestinian people, because ultimately, at the bottom line, we have to do what's going to make sense, that's going to tamp down the violence and give a chance for peace to come in. I argue that this should have been done long, long ago. It's been our policy for a long time in the United States and in the West of a two-state solution, and yet we didn't take any action before October 7th. Now then, you have Hamas, who is paying a lethal price for what they did on October 7th, as they should. When you conduct terrorist operations, you have to pay the price for it, and that is being meted out in every way imaginable. The Palestinian people, on the other hand, should not be further punished because of what Hamas did, and ironically, to say that we're not even going to talk about a two-state solution, meaning they'll be punished even more going forward. I think that doesn't serve anyone's interest, and it doesn't even make the possibility of bringing peace for the Israeli people. So these things are intertwined. They go hand in hand. And if we want peace for Israel, we got to go down this path.
I just wonder whether recognizing Palestine after a major attack is more likely to bring peace. I just wonder whether recognizing Palestine after a major attack is more likely to bring peace, or whether it actually makes them think that they can get away with acts of terror even before Israel's had the opportunity to defeat Hamas.
It's not just October 7th. It's also, and this is actually the bigger driver of why now, is because the Israeli response has killed so many innocent Palestinian people. Now that it has pushed many in the world to say, all right, we better act now. They should have done it before if we were genuinely interested in peace. But now it's not just October 7th. It's all the things that have happened to the Palestinian people since that time in such egregious and massive levels, which has mobilized people all over the world, to include the United States.
And that leads on to the ICC arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, the United States is not a signatory to the ICC, nor, I believe, is Israel. But this is quite a step, isn't it, to find an international body when a country is using its legitimate right to self-defense, issuing an arrest warrant.
Well, look, I'm absolutely in agreement that they have the inherent right of self-defense because of what happened on October 7th. But the international law is unequivocal that it matters how you go about doing it. You don't get a blank check to kill as many people as you want in the process of going after the actual people who did the terrorist event to you. Because, look, I've personally done it. I know what right looks like, and I know how hard it is to do these kinds of operations in urban areas where they're mixed with the people, the terrorists are mixed in with the innocent people. It's hard to do, but there is a way to do it. It takes a lot longer, but it can be done properly where you actually take care of the population. You cannot, no one can make the argument that Israel is taking care of the civilian population. Just issuing some
Israel certainly would. Israel certainly would.
Is not taking care of the people.
Israel says that it has killed one terrorist for every civilian who has died, and says that that is better than the record of the United States in Afghanistan.
I would argue that that's absolutely not true. In no way, shape, or form is that true. I personally engaged in these operations. I've seen them both in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that's not true. It's not.
That's why your insight's so valuable. But if what Israel is saying is true, and the figures that we've got have been revised down very significantly by the United Nations, everyone used to accept essentially the Hamas figure, and it's now come down to well under half the figure that was reported. And therefore, there's some rationale for believing that the Israelis may have more accurate figures. If it is a one-to-one ratio, and if it is better than the US achieved, actually that means the ICC desire to get a warrant is completely void. Otherwise, they should be putting out a warrant.
No, it's not. It's not at all. And look, and all you got to do is you can look with your own eyes and you can see Israel is methodically wiping out the entire infrastructure of Gaza. I mean, it's just plain to see. The maps show it graphically. It's not that they're going after a bad guy in this particular building and they blew up part of it. It's that they're wiping out entire city blocks, and that is not targeted operations. That is methodical dismantling of the ability of the population to even exist without external help and food aid. That's not methodical or targeted intelligence-driven operations of the sort that I'm talking about, where you take care of the population. So it's much more than the people. And by the way, there is almost no way for Israel to accurately find out how many Hamas fighters they kill. How do they even identify who they are? That's one of the biggest problems in this kind of operation. So I don't really take anybody's numbers for granted, but you can't dispute what your eyes see.